Rehoboam, the wrong decision that destroyed a kingdom. A message by Spurgeon. I must begin by stating something that many find provocative. Not every individual who isn't entirely wicked is, in fact, virtuous.
Rehoboam was not a monster.
He was not a bloodthirsty autocrat. He was not a self-proclaimed atheist.
And yet, he brought an entire monarchy to ruin.
How is this possible? How can someone who was merely mediocre or not that bad cause such extensive devastation? Perhaps it is because the greatest threat in life is not blatant transgression, but silent hesitation. What if I told you that the majority of people who experience spiritual, emotional, and even professional failure do not fail out of malice, but because they never committed with their whole heart? When I examine the life of Rehoboam, I realize that his downfall did not begin on the throne, nor with the public decree that fractured the kingdom. The issue started much earlier, in the most silent place of all, a heart that was never truly inclined to seek the Creator. Scripture does not say he detested the divine, nor that he raised his fists against the heavens in rebellion. It says something far more unsettling: he simply did not make up his mind. He embarked on his journey without the divine at the center, and anything that starts that way, sooner or later, concludes in chaos. There is a perilous illusion that deceives most people, the notion that we can start on our own terms and integrate the divine later.
Rehoboam did exactly that.
He inherited a stable nation, a glorious history, and a potent spiritual legacy, yet he believed he could rule supported only by raw power, status, and human opinion. He dismissed sagacious counsel, not because it was incorrect, but because it bruised his ego. He preferred the voices of those who told him what he wanted to hear.
Does that not sound familiar? How many people today do the exact same thing? They seek the views of everyone except the divine.
They listen to friends, social media, trends, specialists, and influencers, but they cannot stomach the idea of yielding to higher wisdom. This gives rise to a quiet dread that few admit, the fear that if the divine truly governs, he will alter plans, challenge choices, and reveal hidden motives. Many do not reject the Bible because they think it is fiction, but because they suspect it is too accurate.
Accurate enough to demand transformation. Accurate enough to seize control from their hands.
Consequently, they choose to inhabit a lukewarm zone. They do not deny the divine, but they do not seek him either. They do not fight him, but they do not surrender. This apparent neutrality carries an exorbitant price. I have witnessed this time and again. Young adults enter maturity filled with expectations, gifts, and vitality, but without a clear spiritual compass. They select a career based solely on a salary of, for example, $80,000, enter relationships out of loneliness, and make choices based on immediate pressure. Later, they wonder why anxiety intensifies and why a sense of emptiness emerges even when everything seems to be going well. Modern research validates what the scriptures have declared for centuries: when a human being lives without a firm moral and spiritual axis, the brain remains in a constant state of alert, insecurity, and dissatisfaction. The soul feels the weight, even if the mouth remains silent. I recall a man I knew well. He was bright, articulate, and well regarded. He always claimed that later on he would attend to his spiritual life. Later he would have time for the divine. Later he would make the necessary changes. But later never arrived. Obligations multiplied, pressures mounted, and when the crisis hit, as it inevitably does, there were no roots. I watched that man lose his clarity, his joy, and his sense of self. It was not a singular massive transgression that brought him down. It was the persistent neglect of never having started with the divine. Rehoboam teaches us a harsh but vital lesson: there is no such thing as a neutral starting point. We are either beginning by seeking the Lord, or we are beginning by drifting away from him. Failing to decide is, in itself, a decision. And the results do not manifest instantly, that is the deception, they accumulate in the shadows. Have you noticed how many people wake up one day and say, "I do not know how I ended up here"? No one arrives there all at once. It happens gradually, step by step, choice after choice, always postponing the heart's commitment. Perhaps you see yourself in this. Perhaps you have never said no to the divine, but you have never given a full yes either. Maybe you live with the feeling of constantly putting out fires, always reacting, never truly leading your own life. The question that resonates is not theoretical, it is profoundly practical. who governs your choices when no one is watching. Because that is where Rehoboam stumbled. And that is exactly where everything begins, or where everything is lost. For a season, everything appeared to be working. Rehoboam thrived. The kingdom grew strong. Devout individuals migrated to Judah, seeking a place where reverence for the divine still existed. For 3 years, loyalty brought stability. And here is a principle many confirm and practice without even noticing: when the heart still leans toward the divine, even flawed leaders are sustained. But the danger does not reside at the start, it lies in the middle of the journey, when prosperity begins to look like personal merit. The account in the second book of Chronicles, chapter 12, verse 1, is clear. When Rehoboam had established the kingdom and had strengthened himself, he became arrogant and forsook the Lord.
It did not happen overnight. No one abandons the divine suddenly.
The distance grows in silence, when a person starts trusting more in the results than in the source.
It is at this stage that many say, "Now I know what I am doing." And that phrase almost always precedes a fall. How often does this happen today?
A person starts out humble, praying, seeking direction, and asking for advice.
Things succeed.
The income grows from $10,000 to $50,000.
Life becomes organized. Recognition follows.
And then, almost imperceptibly, prayer becomes the exception rather than the rule. The Bible becomes a distant reference point instead of a daily guide.
A false sense of autonomy arises.
Behavioral studies show that long periods of success significantly increase the likelihood of impulsive decisions and overconfidence.
The human heart is quick to forget where the help originated.
That is precisely where Rehoboam fell. The divine allowed Shishak, king of Egypt, to humble him. Not as blind vengeance, but as correction.
And here is something that deeply challenges our pride: sometimes, divine discipline is the final act of mercy.
When everything goes too well without the divine, the soul gets lost.
Pain is often the necessary break. Rehoboam humbled himself.
He acknowledged that the Lord was righteous. He was spared from total annihilation. But even so, something had already shattered. He stripped the house of the Lord to bribe the enemy. Instead of restoring what had been lost spiritually, he tried to resolve a spiritual crisis with political and material solutions.
This happens all the time.
People try to heal internal crises with money, distractions, status, or relationships, and none of these can sustain them. I remember vividly seeing this occur in the life of an extremely famous individual.
Mike Tyson did not lose everything for a lack of talent.
He lost it because, at his peak, he abandoned discipline, boundaries, and guidance. When no one challenged him anymore, he believed he needed no one. Success convinced him he was above the rules that once protected him. And the fall was proportional to the height he had reached.
Rehoboam did not initiate great reforms after that.
He did not lead a profound return. He admitted the justice of the divine but did not persevere. And here is one of the most common deceptions: believing that recognizing a mistake is the same as changing your heart.
It is not.
Acknowledging an error might ease the conscience for a moment. Perseverance transforms the character. How many people do you know who say, "I know I am wrong," yet remain in the exact same spot?
How many have gone through crises that should have been turning points for transformation, but became merely pauses before repeating the same pattern? Studies on behavior change show that awareness without practice does not yield lasting transformation. That is why so many return to the same failures. Rehoboam's pride was not loud.
It was subtle. He did not say, "I do not need the divine."
He lived as if he didn't. And that is even more dangerous. Because when life starts functioning without dependency, the heart starts to harden without noticing.
And when the fall comes, because it will, the damage is already deep.
Perhaps you are experiencing a good season right now. Everything seems to be under control. And precisely because of that, this is the question that cannot be ignored: if the divine withdrew his hand today, what would actually support your life? Because persevering in the search is not only necessary during difficult days. It is on the good days that it becomes indispensable. There is something even more subtle and dangerous than starting without the divine or abandoning the search midway:
maintaining the outward form of faith while losing the heart.
Rehoboam reached that exact point.
He said the right words. He acknowledged that the Lord is righteous. Outwardly, there seemed to be repentance. But nothing changed at the root.
No reform. No sincere return. No radical decision.
Just a cold acknowledgement that did not travel from the mind to the center of the will. And this reveals a harsh truth: religion without heart transforms no one.
It merely numbs the conscience for a time.
Rehoboam was not an overt rebel, but neither was he a surrendered man. He remained in that comfortable middle ground where one talks about the divine but does not live for him. Where one admits the divine is right but does not align one's life with that truth. This is one of the greatest conflicts people have with the Bible today. Many say, "I even believe, I respect it, or I agree."
But agreeing is not the same as committing.
And the human heart loves that safe distance, close enough not to feel guilty, far enough not to have to change.
Have you noticed how common this is?
People who know the texts and repeat beautiful phrases, but remain trapped in the same emptiness, the same patterns, and the same pains. Studies on emotional well-being show something interesting: mechanical spiritual practices, done without internal involvement, do not generate lasting peace. On the contrary, they often increase frustration because the person feels they are doing everything right, but inside they remain empty. That is exactly what happens when the heart is not willing.
Faith becomes an obligation, not a source of life.
I clearly remember observing someone who frequented all the right environments and said all the correct words, but carried a constant bitterness.
Nothing satisfied him.
He was always tired, always critical, always hardened. It was not a lack of biblical knowledge. It was a lack of surrender.
He never decided to be righteous in everything.
He chose where to obey and where to compromise. And that internal division exacts a high price. The heart was not made to live divided.
Rehoboam never bothered to seek the Lord completely.
And here is a principle that deeply confronts contemporary culture: no one becomes a person of integrity by accident. A righteous life requires intention.
It requires examination.
It requires conscious choices.
Just as a masterpiece does not emerge from improvisation, a holy life is not born of happenstance.
It is constructed, day by day, with decisions that almost no one sees. Today, many want the results of faith, peace, stability, purpose, without the process of faith. They want the comfort without the correction, the promise without the obedience, the solace without the surrender. But that has never worked.
It did not work for Rehoboam.
It does not work now. Because without the heart, religion dies. And when religion dies, the void expands.
There are public figures who demonstrate the opposite.
William Wilberforce, for instance, did not merely believe in the divine, he aligned his entire life with that conviction. His faith did not stay in his speeches, it became action, perseverance, and real transformation, to the point of impacting an entire nation. It was not just talent. It was the whole heart.
Rehoboam lost that opportunity. He recognized the truth but did not unite with it.
And that is perhaps one of the most silent tragedies of human life, knowing what is right but not loving it enough to live it.
The question that remains is not whether you agree with the divine.
It is whether you are willing to give your heart completely. Because without that, everything becomes a facade. And a facade sustains no one. There is a profoundly modern deception, the idea that life resolves itself, that it is enough to react to what appears, improvise decisions, and follow the flow.
Rehoboam lived exactly like that. He never organized his life before the divine.
He never treated existence as something that requires intention, vigilance, and constant spiritual direction. And when life is left on autopilot, it does not remain neutral, it becomes disorganized.
No one wakes up one day and decides to destroy everything. Ruin is almost always born of daily negligence.
Rehoboam did not fall because he made one scandalous decision, but because he failed to make foundational decisions. He allowed passion, pressure, fashion, and whim to drive what should have been guided by the fear of the Lord.
And this is not an ancient problem, it is a faithful portrait of most people today.
How many live in a rush, always busy, always tired, always solving emergencies, but never stopping
to examine their own soul? How many make important decisions based only on the moment, on impulse, or on the fear of missing out?
Mental health research shows that people who live in a constant reactive mode have higher levels of anxiety and a sense of losing control.
The human heart needs direction, not just movement. I learned this in a painful way during a period of my own life. There were days when I produced a lot, spoke a lot, and worked a lot, and yet, at the end, I felt an emptiness that was hard to explain. Everything was working, but something was misaligned. That was when I realized I was treating life as an improvisation, while I treated small things with extreme care. I prepared speeches with attention and organized appointments with precision, but I left my soul without governance. When I stopped, examined the scriptures calmly, and began to decide less by impulse and more by prayer, something changed deeply. It was not immediate, but it was solid. Life gained coherence. That is why I say, a holy life is a higher work of art than any sculpture or painting, and no work of art is born without thought. The preacher studies for hours to speak for minutes. And yet, many think it is an exaggeration to carefully examine decisions that will shape decades. They want the poem of a righteous life to emerge as an improvisation. That has never happened. It never will. When a person begins to serve the Lord with attention, leaving nothing to chance, something rare emerges: inner firmness. Not an absence of problems, but stability. Studies show that people who live aligned with clear and transcendent values have greater emotional resilience and a sense of purpose. This is not mysticism, it is internal structure. And here I make a practical invitation, perhaps uncomfortable for some: try living for 7 days without making any important decision on impulse. 7 days. Before responding, acting, accepting, or refusing anything significant, stop. Pray. Ask if this builds up or tears down. Observe what happens inside you. Many will discover something surprising: it is not capacity that is lacking, but direction. It is not strength that is lacking, but alignment. Rehoboam lost a kingdom not because he was incapable, but because he never assumed the government of his own heart. And that is the choice presented every day to every person: to live reacting or to live directed. Because when life stops being treated as an improvisation, it finally begins to make sense. If there is something that runs through this entire story like an invisible thread, it is this: life does not collapse due to a lack of information, but due to a lack of decision of the heart. Rehoboam did not lose the kingdom because he did not know what was right. He lost it because he never took a full stand. He started without the divine, proceeded without constancy, and tried to sustain life with external means when the problem was internal. And that is a risk that haunts anyone who keeps postponing profound choices. Perhaps, as you listen to all of this, something moved inside you. Do not ignore that discomfort. It is usually the most honest sign of growth. Wisdom is not accumulating beautiful ideas, it